everyone, this is Swarali Marathe. I am a postgrad student in UNSW doing a double degree in public relations and journalism. And today I'll be the host for our weekly podcast series. I'm also an events officer in PGC. I would like to start this podcast series by acknowledging and paying my respect to the traditional custodians of the lands where each of UNSW campuses are located, and Aboriginal Torres Strait Islanders, elders past, present, and emerging, and their communities who have shared and practiced their teachings for over thousands of years. Now let's welcome our wonderful guest speaker for today, Lucy Marshall. Being engineering professor by profession, she's been a part of UNSW family for over 8 years now. She is the Associate Dean of Research and the Associate Dean of Equity, Diversity of Engineering Faculty. Tonight, she'll be sharing her views with us regarding a very important aspect of working, that is working in teams. She'll be focusing on various elements like working in teams, how to manage team conflicts, team building, and collaboration. So now, without taking much time, we'll just go to the podcast. What do you think, Lucy?
Sounds great.
Yeah, okay. So should we start with the first question?
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
Yeah, so before we focus on the main topic, I would like to ask you about your experience in UNSW as the Associate Dean of Equity and Diversity. How has it been?
So I started that role 3 years ago. And so I hadn't thought before about being on the faculty executive team, and someone suggested that I apply for the position. And it was something that I had a real passion for, sort of an internal passion, this idea that, making sure that engineering as a profession would be something that was inclusive of everyone in the community. And so I'd done some things around women engineering. We had a women's sort of support group that we'd set up in our own school. And so when I got appointed in the role, I was so excited because it was something that I felt really, really passionate about and thought, oh, this is something I can really dig my teeth into. And then it was a little bit daunting because when I started, there had never been an Associate Dean Equity Diversity on campus at all. So I didn't have any sort of clear role models about what was expected in that role and what I should be doing, which meant it was completely open, which meant I could do anything I want. And, equity and diversity should be included in everything that we do at the university. But then I obviously didn't have the time to be able to do everything that I wanted. And it was also at a time when UNSW was really starting to focus a lot more on equity, diversity and inclusion. So they'd set up a new division that was really something that a lot of other universities hadn't been doing. We had a new Deputy Vice Chancellor, EDI, Professor Eileen Baldry. And so it was a really exciting time on campus because there were lots of like-minded people about who were really passionate about a lot of these things, and who then I got to work with, and I could decide on what the role would be about and what it looked like. And so it's been a really great 3 years just working with a lot of people on campus who cared about very similar things to me and wanted to make the university and our community a better place.
That's great. That's great. What according to you are teams? Working in UNSW for so many years, how has your environment been, your work environment been? How has your team members been?
So I do a lot of research, and the most important thing in research is that it's collaborative. I think that no matter what discipline you are in, we are now moving to a point where we realize that to solve the grand challenges of the world, to solve the really big, important questions that are coming up, it can't be done just by one person. Absolutely. It's got to be something where you need contributions from lots of different people who have different sorts of expertise, who have different ways of viewing a problem. And so it's something that's incredibly important in my research area. And then it's also something in engineering that's really important from a teaching perspective as well. We do lots of team-based exercises during our teaching, which students often hate in their first year, is that they're thrown in and forced to work with other people that they maybe haven't met before. But when they go out into their profession, they're always going to work as part of a group. All engineering design has teams behind it. And so that's something that's really important from our teaching perspective as well as our research perspective as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. So as you have been working with teams always, there must have been team conflicts at times. So what kind of conflicts there have been, and how would you manage those?
Yeah. So maybe as an example, I teach in ENG 1000, which is our big first year engineering design course. And students come into this course and they self-select to work on different projects. And in those projects, they're put into teams, or they can choose to work in a team. But regardless, everyone in this really big course, we have sort of 1,100 students enrolled in it, they're all put into an individual team. And conflict arises usually in that either very early or very late, where students feel like other students in their group are not pulling their weight. That's usually where a lot of the conflict arises, is where it seems like one person might be doing more of the work than other people in the group, for whatever reason. And so the thing, I think, when you are forced to work in a team, or required to work in a team, I think the thing that is really important, expectations at the beginning about what your role is in the team and what your contribution is going to be, and what your skills are that you are bringing to the group, and making sure that's set up from the beginning, and then continually checking in on that and communicating with the rest of your group, and making sure that the things that you are responsible for are actually happening, or if they're not, understanding or telling the rest of the group why it's not happening. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we really try to do very early on in our classes, is to say, okay, your first class, you've been put in this team, you need to sit down and meet the others and understand what their perspective is and what their skills are. And then you need to think about how you're going to divide up roles, so that they know at the beginning, okay, we're going to have to make sure that everyone has something that they're responsible for. And if I'm responsible for this and I don't do it, then I'm letting the rest of the team down. And that's really, important and difficult thing, I think, for people to understand right from the beginning, that there's going to be expectations about what they have to do.
Yeah, yes, that's true. So do you have any team building games or like team building strategies, for each of the teams to know about their fellow mates and, their strengths and weaknesses that they might have?
Yeah, I think there are so many icebreaker games that we do in all of our courses, to the point now where we don't do them because everyone rolls their eyes and says, oh, another icebreaker game. I think that the students of today are very savvy about social media and about meeting new people and about, getting acclimated with what other people's perspectives are. And so often what we do is we give them some simple exercises at the beginning about, define your role, and then we leave the students alone and allow them to kind of sort it out, how they define their team and how they define their roles as well. So, I think that building a team and starting a team is a very open-ended problem, but it necessarily has to be. I don't think that there's any structured way in which you can get people to properly work together. It's got to be something that is very self-motivated and self-driven.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So in continuation to what we are talking right now, how do teams work in a design process?
Yeah. So what is the process? So, a design process is a very iterative thing. You start by defining what the problem is and figuring out, like, when you have your problem, what the constraints are in the problem. So like, might be time or money or sort of logistical constraints. And then it's about generating lots of alternatives that might solve the problem that you are working on, and building a prototype and then testing it, and then continually, going through that process so that you will be continually updating and improving your design. And I think the thing that's really important in the design process is that you do have that constant checking in and testing and communicating about how your design is working. And that's very similar to how a team operates. That, at the beginning, you identify what people's roles are and what their contribution is going to be. And then you work together to prototype and test. But you have to constantly, through the prototyping process and through the testing process, be communicating with everyone in your team about how your design is working, how it's functioning. And so that's why teams are really important, that they can, continue to properly interrogate how a design is working, and everyone can look at it from a slightly different angle.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So, how do what tips would you like to give for students who are working in teams to collaborate effectively, to work effectively together? Because when students are assigned a team project, it is not generally that it does not get over in like 2 or 3 days. It goes on for months. And if there are conflicts between the students, then how would you how would you advise them to collaborate in spite of those conflicts?
Yeah, conflict does arise a lot, and it's really tricky, particularly as an engineer. It's something that's really tricky to talk about and to communicate about, because we're very used to honing our technical skills. We like to understand a mathematical or a physical solution to a problem, not necessarily a human-centered solution to a problem. And that's the really important thing about working in a team, is that you have to be able to develop those, they call them soft skills, so that you can properly understand what your teammates' motivations are, what they might be, what their strengths are, what they might be interested in. And so when you are part of a team, I think the most important thing is to lean into your empathy a little bit, and understand that if a team member is not performing in the way that you want them to, or the way that you were used to, that it's probably not a problem with them. It's probably a communication issue, or it could be that they've got something else going on that you don't know about, that means they're not doing the things that you want them to be doing. And so to sort of start from a starting point where you think that all people are generally good and they want to do good things, and if someone isn't not performing the way that that you think they should be, or the think that you want them to be, to try to sit down and properly understand why that's happening, and not from a sort of punitive way, or in a way where you feel like you need to tell them they're doing something wrong, but to really understand, look, this is a problem that we need to solve together. And so I think that communication is really important the whole way through, which is really tricky because different cultures communicate in different ways. And so even understanding someone's cultural background, I think, can help. And
there might also be introverts in the team who doesn't like to socialize with people, or maybe communicate with them that often. So maybe it might be also difficult for them to get along with the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that's really important when you've got really large teams together as well. That you communicate with people in the way that you will get the most out of them. So in a really large group, if I've got, I've got a committee with a couple of people who are introverted, then often they don't like to speak out in the group. And so you either have to invite them to speak out, or you have to speak to them outside of that large group setting, because you're not going to be able to communicate with them properly during that. And so that sort of introvert versus extrovert aspect is really important, and thinking about, well, how can you inclusively work in a group so that everyone contributes in the way that maximizes their productivity. And that might mean allowing the extroverts to be a little extroverted for a while, or putting them in more large group settings, and the introverts, allowing them space to speak, or speaking to them outside of a group.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So considering UNSW as a community, what has been your experience with the UNSW students? How have they been? Because the UNSW is a really diverse community. They're people from all over the world, which is fascinating. And they all, it is really interesting that all people from all over the world come together and work together in harmony. So how has your experience as someone who has been working in teams and also helping others to work in teams, how was your experience with this?
So it's like you said, the university is very diverse. And so you get people from all walks of life and, a lot who might hold very different worldviews to you as well. And one thing I do like about the university is that it gives people space and opportunity to express those worldviews, even if they might not seem tasteful to whatever it is that you think should be happening in the world. So I do think that, some of the policies they have around free speech and things like that, I think there's a real benefit to them. It's very hard to generalize about a community as diverse as that. But one thing I do really like about, I would say almost everyone that I've met at the university, is that they are all very curious people, right? They're coming here because they want to study or they want to research, they want to understand something differently. And so that means they're curious about disciplines or about people or about how society functions. I mean, I know I think I'm a very curious person as well. That's one of the reasons why I love being at university and don't want to leave. And so I think that's pretty unique about universities, to have a whole group of people who want to be there to learn. And I think that's really exciting as well, is that you have, this place where people are mostly here for this sort of singular focus. And I've been really impressed with all of the people who I've met through the division of EDI, and then everyone who goes to all of their events and who supports the things through that. I think overall we have a campus that, it might not be perfect, and we do have lots of people from lots of different areas, but it does try to be as inclusive as possible and recognize that, we have all of these people from different backgrounds and different experiences.
Yeah. So is it possible to develop a culture within a team, even though they're like diverse people, like people from maybe one from India, one from Africa? Have you experienced any such teams that have embraced one culture that is maybe people or humans?
Yeah, I think so. I think I've been thinking about this a lot, about how do we develop a good culture, because it seems like it's like the unanswerable question. And one thing we've noticed in engineering is that we've done a very good job about getting more women into our program, but we have not done such a great job about keeping them in our program. That we tend to see greater attrition than we would like to see. And so I think about, well, that's a cultural issue. The people, they come into engineering and they don't like what they see, and so that's why they leave. So how do we change the culture? And I think it has to be both a top-down thing and a grassroots thing as well. I think having an inclusive culture doesn't work unless you have an inclusive leader, unless you've got someone who is leading the group, who says, no, these are our values, and if you don't like it, then this is not the right team for you, and who actively supports all of that. But I think some of the best cultural change that I have seen has been really when it's something grassroots, like Postgrad Council putting on a podcast, or my own research centre. We have a large number of PhD students who come from lots of different backgrounds and walks of life, and they are the most supportive group of students that I've ever experienced. They help each other out. They have this really great group that celebrates all sorts of different cultural events. They hold special sessions about, how to code in R was one that was raised today, or, how to develop good visualizations, or how to deal with satellite data. And so they help each other out on technical issues as well. And, I feel like that is something that it couldn't come from the top down. It's got to be each of them working together to help each other and support each other to develop that culture.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. So like as diverse people work together, there might also be competition in teams. So can you elaborate a bit more on the thin line between the collaboration and competition? Because when teams collaborate and there's a lot of I don't know, what is the healthy competition, and how does one cross that healthy competition and it becomes, it becomes bad sometimes. So,
Definitely.
What are your views about it?
So, I mean, it is a real issue, right? Particularly when we're talking about, like if it's a zero-sum game. So if you have limited resources and you know that they have to be allocated in some way, whether it's, limited funding between different student societies, for example, then each individually can only get a certain pot of the money, then it can become difficult to get that healthy balance between collaboration and competition. And so you do tend to see during times of stress or when resources are limited, as we've gone through over the last year or so with COVID, when there's less money around, less time around, all those sorts of things, you do tend to see that marginalized groups become more marginalized because people who have power are able to, secure that power and to push out groups who aren't able to get as big a piece of the pie. So when resources are limited, that's a real issue. When they're not limited, then I think that people frequently realize that through collaboration, you're able to be greater than the sum of the parts, that by working with others, you can leverage each other's strengths and, overall reach a goal that's better than any sort of individually could have gone for and then put together. And so it's really unfortunate, but I do think over the last year that we've started to see more competition that's not healthy, that means that groups who tend to be left out get left out even more. And that can only be avoided through improved leadership, through having people in charge who are able to say, these are our priorities and here is where we are going to put our resources.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And according to you, to what extent is a competition positive? And
so I think I'm trying to think of an example where competition has been really positive. I actually think an example where competition has been really great has been through when different universities go up for awards around equity issues. So, for example, for a number of years, I was the lead for Athena Swan on campus. So Athena Swan is a program that tries to improve gender equity, mostly for academic women at university campuses. And a couple of years ago, they started the Athena Swan pilot in Australia. And so there were a number of universities who were putting themselves forward to talk about the progress and the plans that they had around improving gender equity on campus. And it became, I think around that time, it became a real competition between the universities to see who could get this award, who would, achieve the Athena Swan Bronze Award first, and which universities could say they were part of the first cohort that, properly addressed gender equity for women in STEM and for women in academia. And so to see all of the universities competing for this was pretty exciting. And it meant that the universities put more resources into it because they wanted to beat out the other universities. And so I think there are plenty of times when competition can force people to really think about what their priorities are and force them to invest more in the things that they want to win or they want to, beat out other people over, so that we can, properly focus on what it is that we want to achieve. And I think that's, the thing that's one that can happen, but I think it happens across lots of different design processes and teamwork as well, where teams, if they want to beat out other people who are, trying for a patent or who are trying to win a tender, then it can provide that sort of extra motivation to really achieve things.
Yes, correct. So now that you have been working in this equity and diversity for like 3 years, you must have witnessed some sort of change, some sort of modification in the landscape of this diversity and inclusion. So what are your views regarding that? I mean, if it is it any change at all? And if yes, what are your views about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think society is really changing. It really has over the last few years. And, I think that people are changing around their understanding of these issues. Like, I think myself as well, a couple of years ago, there was so much I didn't understand about other people's experiences who came from different backgrounds or in different disciplines, or, had come up through the university system differently. And so I feel like, that's one of the great things about being curious and being at the university, is I get to learn a lot about other people's experiences. And I think with the rise of media and social media, that's happening really broadly across our culture. Things like the Me Too movement and, Black Lives Matter, those sorts of campaigns have really meant that people in the past for whom these issues didn't affect them now are able to properly understand the experiences of other people. And so I think that's been pretty cool. I also think, maybe to look at it a bit critically, that people are getting a little bit wary of things around equity and diversity as well. I gave a lecture earlier this week about diversity, and just talked a little bit about the backlash that you see. When diversity initiatives are discussed a lot, in settings like universities or in corporations as well, in private companies, because if you have a leader or a team leader or the CEO who invests in diversity and who says that's part of the company's values, then a large proportion of your company might think that you are creating that, the company is creating a future that doesn't include them. They think that diversity doesn't account for them. They might be part of the majority. It might be something that they think doesn't affect them directly. And so they might think, well, look, this vision that the university has, or this vision that my corporation has, doesn't include me at all. So why would I be invested in it? And so I think that's one of the tricky things that we're going to have to think about going forward, is how you really avoid that sort of backlash and how you get people on board so they don't think that, that the university is becoming a place that only appeals to the margins and that doesn't include whoever the majority see themselves as. And so I think getting everyone on board is something that's difficult to do, but something that I think that we will have to think about and we'll have to do.
It's necessary in the coming, the near future.
Yeah, I think so. I've had multiple people say to me this year alone that they feel the pendulum has swung too far on anything, on gender equity or other sorts of equity lenses. And when I hear that more frequently, I think, I don't think it has. But if other people think it has, we need to make sure that they're on board with this journey as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So as we have almost come to the conclusion of our podcast, would you like to share with the audience some tips to work in a team, to build strategies to work in a nice team, to be nice to people, and to to learn to collaborate with people and have healthy competition instead of just making it rather bad?
Yeah, so the word I like more than nice is kind. I think that you can be critical about someone but still be kind to them and understand where they might be coming from or how they might be better motivated to get things done. But I think my biggest tip for working in a team is probably my biggest tip of being an engineer as well, is that continue to be curious. So as well as trying to understand, in engineering, we tinker with systems and with objects and with, trying to understand how things are put together. And I think those sorts of skills can be transposed to people as well. And so being curious about people and understanding what lens they have on the world and what their skills are and what they can contribute to a team, I think just helps make you a better team member and ultimately a better leader as well, if you can properly understand what people are bringing to the table. And so that is the thing that I would encourage everyone, that I'm continually telling my children as well, is just continue being curious about the world and about people.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, so I would say that we have come to a end. We are like almost ending the wonderful session that we had with you, and I'm sure our students also have got many insights of working in a team, and the positives and like the do's and don'ts of working in a team, and all sorts of things that are very essential today, because even though we are online, we are still together, we are still working in teams, and the only change that has happened is that we have to come online instead of being in person. And there are also many students who have stranded abroad, so they cannot come. But I think this is a phase where being collaborative and working in harmony is very necessary, because maybe you won't even see that person, you won't even see your teammate in the future because he's not here, but you're still working with him. So I think that's very insightful, and the advice that you gave was very insightful as well. So thank you for coming to the podcast, and I hope the audience, I'm sure the audience has also enjoyed. So yeah, thanks for coming.
Thank you so much, Swarali.
Yeah, and for the students, we have this podcast every week. So keep an eye on our Facebook page for the next speaker who will be coming. So stay tuned.